Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Wednesday to you. Lots to talk about in the tropics, as well as active weather across portions of the United States. Let me share my screen with you here, and we are going to take a look at Tropical Storm Bret, as well as two potential systems right behind it, and a very active start to our tropical season, especially this Cape Verde season, which we typically don't see get going until maybe later in July or August. And right now, we've got storms just continuing to move across the Atlantic and develop. The first one, Tropical Storm Bret, is going to be impacting the Lesser Antilles here later tomorrow night and especially on Friday. That is going to take a track into the Caribbean and likely weaken as it moves south of Hispaniola and Jamaica. And that is due to a lot of wind shear, so it does not appear to be a threat to the United States. The one after it is Invest AL93. That could become our next tropical depression in the next day or so, and then Tropical Storm Cindy. That could threaten the northern Windward Island or Leeward Islands and then take a turn to the right and could be an issue for Bermuda down the road, but a lot of uncertainty with that. And then models are picking up on yet another one that could be moving off of Africa here today and then eventually developing later next week over the central Atlantic. And that one could follow a similar track to Bret, but it is still off in the distance. We also have a coastal low moving through the Carolinas that's bringing heavy rain and gusty winds to the mid-Atlantic region. That will not develop into anything tropical, but will bring impacts to the coast here over the next few days. Here's a look at why things are so active. And we see over the Atlantic basin, extremely warm waters over the eastern Atlantic with respect to average. In fact, we're running 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above the average. So the water temperatures right now that you see over the eastern and central Atlantic are what you would typically see in August and early September. And that's why we're seeing so much development. Closer to the United States, water temperatures are not running that hot. In fact, we're a little below average over the eastern Gulf and here over the Atlantic seaboard here. So fortunately for us, we're not seeing extreme warmth at this point, but that does not mean we're not going to see any kind of tropical systems. It just means we're a little bit behind the eight ball here when it comes to warming of the Atlantic waters. Here's a look at the tropics, and you can see here, I'm going to annotate for you. Let me grab my cursor and draw for you, and it takes a little bit of time, so I apologize for that. Find my colors. You can see this is Tropical Storm Bret right here. It's about 2 days from landfall over the northern Windward Islands. That will continue into the Caribbean. Behind it, our next flare-up will likely become a depression and probably a tropical storm before the end of the week. The next name on the list would be Cindy. Behind that, a very large wave moving off of Africa that models have not really picked up too much on at this point, but I think they probably will just based on the trends we've seen from the first two storms. And the next name on the list is Dawn, not Danny, like I said before, it's actually Dawn. So we could have Bret, Cindy, and Dawn all within the next 10 days or so. Closer to home, things are pretty quiet in the tropics. We've got a strong upper level low that is spinning over the southeast. That's producing strong wind shear across the Gulf and the Western Caribbean. We do have a trough as well here over the central Atlantic that's going to drop southward. Bret's going to avoid that trough and continue west. However, I think Cindy is, by the time it gets over here, is going to start to feel the effects of that trough, and that means it'll turn in between our big high pressure ridge here and our big high pressure ridge over here. So it's going to find the weakness between the two and take a turn to the north. After this trough moves through, our next disturbance very well could stay south of it, but again, that is a little bit too far off in the future to make a definitive call on. Right now, models are keeping it on a track close to where Bret is tracking. We also have some thunderstorms flaring up here off the Mexican coastline, which some models develop into a tropical system here as we get to maybe the weekend and beyond, and that could threaten the Mexican Riviera as well. So on the Pacific side of things, we've got something to watch as we continue on into the future here. All right, let's take a look here at our first storm, and that is Bret. And you can see it's actually moving off the map. Here's the next one. Cindy is the next name, and then you can see the next flare-up coming off of Africa really looks robust. It's disorganized, but it's already growing in size, so I find it hard to believe we're not going to have some form of system coming out of this maybe in about 5 or so days from now. Here's a look at the Hurricane Center forecast. You see Bret on the map, then you see our next disturbance, which has a 70% chance of becoming our next depression in the next 2 days by Friday morning, and then an 80% chance of developing between Friday and on into the weekend. So likely going to be in our next system. Bret is on a westerly track. This one's more on a west-northwesterly track. I would not be shocked if we saw a yellow area here in the next 12 hours, designated by the National Hurricane Center, but we'll have to see on that one. Looking at Bret, we are going to have a plane flying into the storm later today to figure out what's going on with it, how well it's developing, and what winds look like. We do have a tropical storm watch for Barbados and the northern Leeward Islands. The storm is expected to approach Barbados here later in the day tomorrow, and then approach the northern Leeward or Windward Islands. These are the windwards, I should say, Thursday night, and then move through later Thursday night, and then move away on Friday morning into the Caribbean. Generally speaking, winds are expected to be 60 miles per hour to maybe as high as 70 miles per hour in the next day. And then a slow weakening trend is expected beginning tomorrow night as wind shear starts increasing. And we will see gradual weakening, and perhaps this storm could even get sheared apart as we get into the second part of the weekend south of Jamaica. So some good news here for the greater Antilles in that this is going to stay south of you, and it's likely going to be weakening. And it may even weaken quicker than what this shows. In Central America, I think we'll still have to keep an eye on things in Honduras and Nicaragua, maybe Belize. However, we may have a system that's no longer got a circulation and no longer developing, and that is due to stronger wind shear, which I'll show you in a little bit. Here's a look at the center of Bret. You can see thunderstorm activity has grown more central to the center of the storm, so it has begun to strengthen some. Yesterday morning, 40 miles per hour. Today, 60 miles per hour. But it is still struggling a little bit here. You can see, we had a nice flare up last night, and now we've got kind of just more disorganized convection. So while the winds here are locally strong, it is not developing very quickly, and very unlikely that it's probably going to be a hurricane. More than likely a stronger tropical storm here today, and then slowly weakening tomorrow and especially towards the end of the week. The ensemble from the GFS shows our likelihood of a tropical storm still fairly high tomorrow, and then beginning to drop down to about 60% tomorrow night after it moves past the northern Windward Islands. And then that threat for it to continue to hold on to that status does drop off here on Saturday. And by Sunday, the GFS ensembles say we do not even have a tropical storm anymore. Maybe we have a depression at that point, but the odds are about 30% here south of Jamaica. And then a very slim chance, only like one ensemble even shows it as a depression by the time it nears the Honduran coastline later Monday into Monday night, due to the fact that we're going to have a lot of wind shear here in the Western Caribbean. Our model tracks continue to trend south with our storm, and overall right over the middle of the Caribbean, and then approaching Honduras and Nicaragua here in about 5 or 6 days as a weakened system. This is climatology. It's not taking this track. There are a couple of ensembles that do try to take it up farther north, but you could see a pretty good cluster of it going right across the Central Caribbean. So that is going to be the forecast that things go with. If you look at the GEFS, this is the ensembles from the GFS. All of them keep this south of Hispaniola and Jamaica now, and dying off before it gets to Central America. The European agrees as well. There are a couple of members that try to take it up closer to Mexico, but staying well south. At that point, it's still going to be a fairly weak system. Really, the next 2 days is where Bret's going to get its best chance at being a stronger tropical storm. As you can see on the intensity forecast, things do quickly level off after we get past Friday and into the weekend. And even the HWRF model, which was going gangbusters here, keeps it a tropical storm. So finally, it's backed off from its strong storm bias. And why it's weakening, very clear to see here. Bret is in an area right now of low to moderate shear. Green is favorable. Yellow is kind of moderate shear, and then red is high shear. As the storm moves west, you can see there is strong westerly shear of 40 to 50 knots wading across much of the western and central Caribbean. So that will likely lead to a gradual weakening trend beginning Friday and continuing into the weekend. The next system, which could be Cindy, has a little bit better chance here of surviving, as this wind shear is going to be moving away, and we'll see kind of more marginal conditions. But it does not look like it's going to strengthen too quickly. So we'll take a look at that in just a second. Right now, the accumulated strong winds will start moving into the northern Leeward Islands. This is Dominica. This is actually, I believe, Guadeloupe. And so you'll see winds moving into this area Thursday evening, and the strongest winds are going to be later Thursday night. We could have gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour over Dominica, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent. staying north of Barbados, it looks like on the GFS. And then this wind track continues well over the waters and remains just to the south of the Virgin Islands and of the Windward Islands. We could have a few gusts over 30 miles per hour, maybe even the 40 in here, but we're not going to see widespread tropical storm conditions. So this is going to hit pretty quickly and then move away pretty quickly. And by the weekend, we'll be out of the islands completely over the Central Caribbean. Here's a look at the European. You can kind of see that things quickly move this direction, and then the strongest winds die off. And then here's what could be Cindy, which could also bring tropical storm conditions well to the north and east of the islands. According to the European, weaker weather as we get south of Bermuda at that point, weaker wind at that point. And here's the European, and you can see it's a little farther south than the GFS, keeps the strongest wind south of Dominica, impacting just the northern parts of the leewards and staying just to the north of Barbados and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, staying just north. So we may see gusts of 50, maybe even 60 miles per hour over about a 6-hour stretch, and then things are moving away, staying south of Puerto Rico. Here's our next system, AL93. This is the invest. That could be our next depression. It is very close to where Bret was here about 4 days ago, a little bit farther south. You can see still quite a bit of wind shear off to the west, and we see the storm has grown in size, and you can see that on the infrared, but still not enough organization. The storm is moving pretty quickly, doesn't have a chance to wrap up and become very organized, but that could happen according to our models by the end of the week, maybe even tomorrow, where we could have a low-end tropical storm. You'll see 93L on the map here. GFS has about a 50% chance that we have a tropical storm by Friday morning. That chance continues and then starts to fade. And even the GFS says this system's going to struggle and may weaken below tropical storm intensity to a tropical depression here by Sunday, Monday and Tuesday. While some of the models show something up in here, they do not have it as a tropical depression. So Cindy, or whatever our next depression is, 4, could be a short-lived storm as well. The average of the tracks keeps it to the east of the northern islands here. There's one model that takes it across, but everything else is a couple hundred miles east, which is pretty tightly banded. So the models do agree this gets tugged northward by our incoming trough and continues on a northward trajectory. And the ensembles pretty much agree, with a couple of outliers, of course. They keep the pressure pretty high, mostly in the 10,000, in the 1,000 range or high 990s, which means if this does become a tropical storm, it's probably not a strong tropical storm. And then beyond that, the European loses a lot of its members over the central Atlantic. But if it were to hold together, it's going to be a weak system, maybe affecting Bermuda, maybe not, and then perhaps heading up towards the Maritimes of Canada as a remnant low at that point. Ignore the purple line, that's the HWRF. It has that bias. Everyone else, though, says it's a tropical storm here in about 24 to 48 hours. So by the end of the week, we may have Cindy. We probably have a tropical storm that's of moderate intensity over the weekend, and then some models weaken our system, others keep it steady state. So we'll have to wait and see at this point. But at that point, it's going to be passing north and east of the islands and moving into the south central Atlantic Ocean. Here's a look at the GFS model. You can track our storms. This is Bret. This is future Cindy. The next wave, the GFS does not develop very quickly, but it does have kind of something to keep an eye on down here. But notice here early next week, we lose Bret. It's basically dying at this point. This is Cindy, or future Cindy, and that's taking the turn up. And the GFS, I think, is going to be too strong as this comes in towards Bermuda. I don't think it's going to be a hurricane affecting Bermuda at this point. The next system, the GFS, is not really picking up on, but I do think it's something that could develop. We'll just have to wait and see, depending on what our wind shear looks like. And you can see on the Pacific side of things, the GFS has a quickly developing system south of the Riviera, and then another system behind it. We'll have to wait and see on those as well. Here's the European. You can see it takes Bret across the islands here late in the day tomorrow, future Cindy. So Bret's already moving south and dying here before even the weekend. Cindy is still holding her own. We think Cindy, maybe a weak tropical storm, but pretty much fading and moving off to the right, even of the trajectory where it could impact Bermuda. However, it does look like it's still trying to hold her own here, hold its own somewhere over the Central Atlantic. This is Bermuda, and this is our system here that we're keeping an eye on. Meanwhile, the next disturbance coming off of Africa, it does not develop really at this point. But some models show that happening. Here's the icon, the German model. You see what's left of Bret moving through here and weakening. This is what could be Cindy, but it's keeping it very weak. Bret pretty much dead here by Saturday night. This is potential Cindy. And then the icon does develop this next wave as it comes across into the central Atlantic. It has a depression, maybe a very weak tropical storm. This is next Monday night. You can see what's potentially left here of Cindy as just a remnant low. And this could be Dawn, or it could just be Tropical Depression 5. And it is following the exact same track as Bret here, moving through the islands here next Wednesday. What's left of what could be Cindy is not moving much. It's kind of stalled here south of Bermuda. So we're going to have a lot of time to watch it. But at the same time, as it stalls, it's going to continue to feel the tug of the wind shear. I did mention a system off the eastern seaboard. You do have a weak low pressure in here, kind of a weak inflection. It doesn't look like it's going to strengthen too quickly, and no immediate threats to the east coast. And you can see the icon does have a system south of Mexico as well, but probably not a quickly strengthening one like the GFS shows. Here's a quick look at the HAFS. You can see Bret on here, maybe at its strongest point here around this time tomorrow, and then it shows some slow weakening as it passes through here right around 3, 4, 5 in the morning here on Friday, and then continuing into the Caribbean. And then we start to see a weakening trend later Friday night, early on Saturday, as pressures go above 1,000 millibars and continue to climb and kind of stay there. It does try to hold it together south of Jamaica, but you can see it's pretty much starting to kill off that central circulation here by early in the day, Monday or late Sunday night. Here's the following system here, and you can see it's not going to be as strong as Bret in the next couple of days, but maybe a tropical storm, perhaps a 40 or 50 mile per hour storm, Cindy, here by Friday night. You can see it's already weakening here over the weekend, and the tropical model takes it well east of the islands. Other models are closer, but you can see a very weak system, maybe a depression here Sunday night, Monday. This is Bermuda. It's still got a while before it could even get to Bermuda, but it's going to be a weak system at that point. In the Pacific, we see a potential for a tropical storm here forming. That most likely is going to be coming on next Wednesday, where it could develop, or Thursday. So we'll keep an eye on that the second half of next week south of Mexico. All right, we'll look at severe weather and the rest of the weather across the U.S. We did have some pretty big hail around Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and across South Louisiana yesterday. We did have some wind and hail reports over the Dakotas. The east was quieter, but we have had some severe weather across parts of central Florida and southern Georgia. I think overall we're looking at quieter weather in the east, but potential tropical downpours, maybe a few isolated severe storms. Again, we're primarily looking at Florida. We may have to keep an eye on the Carolina coastline. There are storms coming up the coast here near Morehead City towards the Outer Banks. But our bigger threat for severe weather is going to be in the high plains and then moving south and eastward across the big sky country of Texas. There will be a chance for some tornadoes in Wyoming and parts of Nebraska and Colorado. A bigger risk, though, for severe wind as we get into this afternoon and evening over western Oklahoma and north central and northwest Texas. And there will be a threat for big hail in both of these areas as well. Taking a look at tomorrow, not as widespread an area of severe weather, downpours in the east, but we do have a slight risk tomorrow over parts of Cheyenne and Denver. It includes Denver, where we could have some pretty big hail and strong winds around the Front Range and up into southeastern Wyoming. We'll have more active weather starting to move off to the north and east into the Dakotas and Nebraska. And that is going to expand over the weekend eastward and include the Omaha area, as well as Kansas City, Sioux Falls, and even Des Moines, Iowa. We could have a few tornadoes, but more than likely we're seeing large hail in this area, and we're seeing widespread wind damage. So a very active start to our weekend. I'll talk more about that in the coming days. You can see the GFS model has slow-moving system over the eastern U.S., low pressure over the Ohio Valley, moisture coming up from Florida all the way up the East Coast. Our next storm moving into the Dakotas. That's going to bring severe weather today into tomorrow. Here in the high plains, heavy rain in Montana, even mountain snow around Yellowstone potentially. Then we see heavy rain and storms as we cool off in the Dakotas here the next couple of days. That rain moves into Minnesota and Iowa, and we will eventually see some rain finally in parts of Illinois, southern Missouri, and Wisconsin and western Michigan later on this weekend as that storm system moves across eastern Canada. Next week, we see high pressure rebuilding in the southwest, should be quieter across Texas. It'll still be unsettled, though, across the northern plains, the Midwest, into the Carolinas by the first half of next week. Quieter weather for Louisiana today, thank goodness, but you can see our next wave of storms develops here. This is 6, 7 o'clock in the panhandles. Big storms possible, maybe tornadoes, but especially large hail and strong winds. And this area is going to move quickly southeast this evening into northwestern Texas. Should die by the time it gets close to Dallas, but west of Dallas, we may still have some intense storms carrying into the central part of Texas, right into the heart of Texas here overnight tonight, maybe around Georgetown, Round Rock, and Austin, and then weakening tomorrow morning to the west of Houston. Beyond this, we do see slightly quieter weather across Texas tomorrow, more active weather across Trans-Pecos region and West Texas, maybe Midland, Odessa, but more of the storms at that point are going to be across New Mexico and the very high plains. Looking at the plains, we do see an active storm pattern here the next couple of days, heavier showers and storms possible later in the day today, especially across Wyoming and northeast Colorado. You can see this is about 5 o'clock Mountain Time, 6 o'clock. We have some big storms possible around Denver, to the east of Casper and to the north of Cheyenne. We'll have some stronger storms as well towards Bismarck, North Dakota. These will all move east and bring some heavy rain to this region, weakening overnight tonight with more storms possible tomorrow across some of the same areas. Looking at the southeast, really no organized severe weather. I would watch out though in Houston, in the Tampa Bay area, as well as the Panhandle here for heavier showers and storms. And waves of rain continue across Georgia, the Carolinas, and Tennessee over the next 24 to 48 hours. Pattern stays active across Florida here right on into tomorrow and through the end of the week as well. Here's a look at the Carolinas. We continue to have some potential flooding over the upstate into western North Carolina. We could also have some flooding over parts of eastern West Virginia and western Virginia, west of the Shenandoah Valley, as all this moisture up glides. We'll see rain moving northward here into the northeast tonight, and especially tomorrow, waves of rain move up through New York City. Some of them could be briefly heavy, and there is a slight risk for some flooding today over parts of the southeast. Tomorrow, that risk for flooding starts to climb up into Virginia. And then Friday, just a marginal risk across the central Appalachians up into the northeast, but a bigger area to watch out for here across the Dakotas and Montana. That shifts up into central Canada. As we get to the day Saturday, we could have minor flooding as well in the northeast on Saturday and Sunday. So expect wet weather this weekend across the northeast and across the north central United States. Here's our rain forecast. You can see why. Lots of rain over the central U.S., lots of rain over the southeast. That spreads north and eastward next week into the northeast. We'll see some pretty big numbers here over the next week with amounts that will continue to be in the inches, between 3 and 6 across Florida. South Florida could see several inches of rain, a few inches in the Carolinas and middle and eastern parts of Tennessee. In the mid-Atlantic region, we'll see all this rain spreading northward here up into the Delmarva today, into Pennsylvania, New Jersey this evening, into New York tomorrow, and then eventually into New England. And amounts through the first half of next week could be pretty heavy, 4 or 5 inches possible around the Poconos, 3 to 4 around the Chesapeake Bay area as well. Farther north and east, you'll see that rain spreading northward this weekend. It'll eventually start getting wet in Maine, but mainly western New England and New York State are going to see the heaviest of rain. And up into Canada as well, significant rain is possible through the middle of next week. And the north central U.S. will be pretty wet as well, with amounts that could get over a few inches here by the end of the week. That'll knock off our heat wave that we're in across the Dakotas. And by the end of the weekend, we could see 3-4 inches of rain across much of Montana, North Dakota, and northwestern Minnesota. We will eventually see some of this moving into the Ohio Valley as well, which I will show you guys here, because y'all really do need the rain. We don't really get it through Saturday, but Sunday we see some amounts starting to move into Indiana and starting to move into Illinois. But again, this area continues to suffer from drought, and I don't think we see a lot of relief in the next 10 days. Finally, temperatures remain on the cool side, but it will be humid in the eastern U.S., staying cool across the west here today. We'll see extreme heat continuing over parts of Texas, where we've had all-time records tied. We'll see very warm weather across eastern Canada. As we get to the weekend, it stays cool across the southwest, but the northwest starts warming up, and the eastern U.S. does turn a little bit warmer, so we'll have some warmer temperatures early next week before the next wave of cool air moves down towards the middle of next week. Thank you all so much for watching. Really appreciate your time today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I thank you for your time, and I give all the glory to God who allows me to do this. This is my calling. God has given me the spiritual gift of being a forecaster, and I give all thanks to Him for allowing me to do this as a Christian person. Psalm 145 8, the Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger, and of great mercy. The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. All thy works shall praise thee, O Lord, and thy saints shall bless thee. They shall speak of the glory of thy kingdom and talk of thy power, to make known to his sons of men his mighty acts and the glorious majesty of his kingdom. Folks, we have a great God who serves us, and we all have the gift of eternal salvation through his son, Jesus Christ. Not many of us have accepted it. Many of us maybe did and have kind of gone away from it, but the Lord is good and he will continue to be good, and I praise him every day. I never stop chasing God, and I pray that you don't either. I'm happy to pray for you with whatever situation or struggles you're going through, because I know I've gone through many, but the Lord has been faithful to me, and maybe it doesn't happen on my time, it happens on God's time, but things do happen, and every day is a blessing and an opportunity to serve the greater kingdom and to minister to other folks as well. And I very much appreciate that gift from God. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. We'll see you again tomorrow. God bless.